This video is brought to you by Current. It was dubbed the toughest call in football by Sports Illustrated. To be more specific, in 2011, the decision of who the best quarterback was in the upcoming NFL draft was up for debate. The thing was, many franchises felt that this class was absolutely loaded, and when draft night came, something rather rare took place. In round 1, there were 4 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. Since the league had adopted the draft all the way back in 1936, this had only happened twice. But despite this being considered one of the most talented first-round drafts in recent memory, most of those quarterbacks taken turned out to be massive flops. Looking back, it's hilarious to see what experts were saying, and the fact that there was even a debate going on as to who was the best just goes to show you how hard this stuff is to predict. Then on top of that, there were some other quarterbacks taken later in that draft that proved to be much better than most of those first rounders, with possibly the most underrated 6th round quarterback the draft has seen. But before we dive into the 2011 class, this video wouldn't be possible without Current. This Visa debit card right here is the future. It acts as your mobile bank, a completely real bank account with no hidden fees and no minimum balance requirements with a free overdraft up to $100. The perks of this card are really what stand out. You have the ability to use up to 55,000 ATMs for free. You can get paid up to 2 days faster. You can deposit checks with the camera on your smartphone. You can earn points on purchase and redeem for cash. And you can send money for free using your Current card, which works with Apple Pay, Google Pay, Cash App, and Venmo. Lastly, it's so easy to get started. It will literally take you 2 minutes to sign up, and they will send you the card for free. So click the link in the description to get signed up today, and shout out to Current for sponsoring this video.
The 2011 NFL Draft is officially open. The Carolina Panthers are on the clock.
The Panthers had had a brutal previous year. They drafted quarterback Jimmy Clausen in the 2010 NFL Draft, and he quickly proved to not be their future. He was a turnover machine. The team struggled mightily with him at quarterback. Jimmy Clausen clearly wasn't the future. It was time for the franchise to readdress the quarterback position. As the draft approached, they were hoping it was going to be Andrew Luck, but Luck decided to stay in school for another year. So inside their draft war room, the debate had come down to 2 names: Missouri's Blaine Gabbert and Auburn's Cam Newton. Cam was literally a superhuman. He was in a class of his own physically, standing at 6'5" and nearly 250 pounds. Also, he could run a 4.5 40. On the field, he was as dominant as any player we had ever seen. There was no pro comparison for him because we had not seen a dude like this before. A guy who had transferred from a junior college to winning the Heisman and national title in 1 year. It was the story of 2010. Then there was Blaine Gabbert. Gabbert didn't receive the same level of hype as Newton had during the college season, but once NFL scouts began analyzing game tape leading up to the draft, Gabbert's stock dramatically went up. He possessed the size and arm strength of a first-round quarterback, with the ability to run as a bonus. He was a leader for Missouri's football team, and a huge reason for their success. But when you start looking at him alongside Cam Newton, the comparison wasn't all that close. Numbers-wise, the winner was Newton by a landslide. Cam put up video game-like stats on an Auburn team who wasn't even that good before he got there. Gabbert had taken a step back in production from his sophomore year to his junior year. Level of competition, Cam played in the SEC, which reigns king over college football and puts more athletes in the NFL than any other conference, whereas Gabbert played in the Big 12, a league that's a few notches down in talent from the SEC, and they're also notorious for poor defense. Lastly, when it comes to the eye test, Cam was bigger, stronger, faster, had come up clutch more often in big games, and had much higher potential to grow than Gabbert did. So you may be asking, what was the debate between these two exactly? The thing was, Cam was viewed in a negative light for a variety of reasons. He had a complicated history of maturity issues that linked back to his time at Florida, plus the alleged scandal that happened with his father over the money situation with Mississippi State. Then on top of that, with his personality being more flashy and confident, it just rubbed some people the wrong way. people don't like their quarterbacks having fun. Football-wise, even though his stats were out of this world, you can't judge a prospect just based solely on his numbers. He played in a college offense that scouts called elementary level, and the jump from a one-read system to an NFL playbook was considered insurmountable by his haters. Meanwhile, Blaine Gabbert was praised for all the things that you couldn't see on tape. Reports came in that he was a smart dude with a near photographic memory, and he was considered a good leader. The funny part was that Gabbert played in a spread college system that also didn't translate to the league. But unlike how Cam was criticized, similar issues for Gabbert received different answers. Questions about his game, like his poor deep ball accuracy, were met with responses like, well, he's a smart kid, just give him a good coach and he'll get better.
With the first pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Carolina Panthers select Cam Newton, quarterback, Auburn.
Without even taking his first NFL snap, Cam Newton was already being dubbed the most hated rookie in America. There were hot takes like why he was going to be the worst draft pick ever, citing reasons for not being very smart, his terrible accuracy, and using the fact that he had never lost in college as a starter as a negative. But Cam went on to do what he does best. He silenced the critics in the only way he can. He shrugged it off, put in the work, threw on his pads, and balled out.
The Cardinals all standing in a two-point stance on the third down. Here comes the blitz. Newton puts it up. He's got a man, and he completes it. Steve Smith is going all the way. Touchdown. Pump fake. Newton puts it up to the end zone. Steve Smith. He's got it for a touchdown. Newton pump fake. Goes the other side. Olsen makes a nice adjustment. Olsen inside the 10 and down to the 1-yard line. It ends it again on second and goal. Newton dives. And he's in. Touchdown.
"5 years after being drafted, and there's no doubt the Panthers got the right guy. Cam Newton had become a 3-time Pro Bowler by then, led his team to a Super Bowl appearance, and took home the league MVP in 2015. The second half of Cam's career has been a struggle. A Super Bowl hangover, battling injuries, and inconsistent play led to the eventual release from Carolina. Cam's career has been defined often by his antics and what happened during Super Bowl 50. But at the end of the day, Cam was worth the #1 overall pick for what he did during his time with the Panthers. And perhaps we'll see a career renaissance in New England. Despite a rough 2020 campaign, the Patriots have chose to rebuild around Cam, showing that they trust that he could be the guy. As for how it's gonna go, only time will tell. But anyways, let's get to the other quarterbacks from the 2011 NFL Draft.
What do you think the Titans are doing right here?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, there's a quarterback sitting right there that they probably didn't expect to be sitting there. So Blaine Gabbert sitting there not looking real happy.
The 8th pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Jake Locker, quarterback, Washington.
Now we have our first shocker of the draft. Jake Locker is the second quarterback taken, not Blaine Gabbert.
This shocked everybody. Jake Locker was a guy who had been written off as a second-round pick or later by some experts. What's crazy was Locker had actually been projected as the top pick way early into the 2011 draft process. But after his senior year didn't go so well, his draft stock dropped just a bit. He was definitely in the top quarterback discussion at one point, but people were torn because some said that he didn't deserve a first-round pick, others still felt that he was a top 10 kind of guy. Ultimately, Tennessee saw his potential upside. Jake Locker was a guy who had carried a struggling program on his back for most of his college career, constantly running for his life, making plays just to keep his team alive. Now, if he could just get some decent pieces around him, he could probably turn into a decent NFL quarterback. But less than 5 years later, Jake Locker chose to leave the NFL for good. He was primarily the backup at first. Then he became the starter in 2012. He would end up tearing his non-throwing shoulder early in the season. Then he returned later to only put up mediocre numbers on a struggling team. Year 3 and 4 were much of the same. On top of that, he had 3 different offensive coordinators come in and try to run their own systems. Being a top pick, Locker obviously took a lot of heat during this time. He was supposed to save this team, but when you can't stop getting hurt and constantly have new coaches coming in and out, it's just a recipe for disaster. To the opposite of Cam Newton thriving in the spotlight, Jake Locker was more of a low-key dude who just loved the game of football. But with the amount of pressure that came with being one of the top picks in the draft, it ultimately caused him to lose his passion for the game. Luckily, it does seem like he's at peace with leaving the NFL.
With the 10th pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Blaine Gabbert, quarterback, Missouri.
When Jacksonville saw that Blaine Gabbert was still somehow on the board at number 10, they were more than excited to trade up and select the future of their franchise. They actually had Pro Bowler David Garrard on the roster, whom Gabbert was hopefully going to be able to sit behind and learn from for a year. Only, things didn't go as planned. Gabbert was thrust into the starting role very early, and in his first official game as the starter, he went up against none other than Cam Newton. In a matchup that became known as the Monsoon Bowl, Cam Newton found a way to come out on top, and never looked back. Meanwhile, Gabbert struggled in that matchup, and went on to have one of the worst rookie seasons ever recorded, according to Football Outsiders. Now, to be fair to Gabbert, he didn't exactly have the greatest pieces around him, and his head coach would end up being fired following 2011. 2012 wasn't much better. Gabbert still played poorly and ended the year on injured reserve. Also, his second head coach would be fired as well. In year 3, with his third head coach, it was clear that Gabbert wasn't getting better. With 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions in 3 games, coupled with another injury-riddled season, and Gabbert's time in Jacksonville came to a sad conclusion. The front office decided it was best to move on following the season, and they traded him for next to nothing. Since then, Gabbert has been a backup journeyman. Funny enough, he's actually a Super Bowl champion now after being Tom Brady's backup last season. At least he was able to stay in the NFL. We can't say the same for everybody in this video.
With the 12th pick in the 2011 NFL Draft, the Minnesota Vikings select Christian Ponder, quarterback, Florida State.
Another big-time low moment.
With quarterbacks flying off the board left and right, Minnesota got antsy and drafted the guy that no one was talking about being selected this high. It was just as shocking as the Jake Locker pick. But here's the thing. Despite not being featured on that SI cover with the other 3 quarterbacks, Christian Ponder was considered by some as the most pro-ready in this class. So who was this dude? Due to average arm strength and size for an NFL quarterback, Christian Ponder was never considered a high first-round talent. But because he played in a pro-style offensive system at Florida State, he was the most pro-ready. Then after winning the Senior Bowl MVP, scouts began to think more about what he could be in the NFL. He fit the West Coast offense, a scheme that's more suited to quick decisions by the quarterback instead of impressive downfield bullets by a gunslinger. Of course, the Vikings ran that scheme, so despite Ponder being a second round or third round talent, they had to snag the guy they felt was the best fit for their offense. His rookie year began with a battle between him and Donovan McNabb. The battle was won by McNabb at first, but he would eventually lose due to poor performance. Ponder would step in and show promise early, even setting a few franchise records. Then the following year, Ponder would lead the Vikings to the playoffs for the first time in years. Seems like they found the guy, right? Only, as it turned out, that 2012 Vikings team was carried by one dude.
Especially Percy Harvin with the shallow crossing route. Peterson. First down. Peterson. There goes Adrian Peterson.
When Adrian Peterson was in his prime, he was absolutely unstoppable. Despite making the playoffs in 2012 with Ponder at quarterback, most people understood that this was Adrian Peterson's team, and Ponder was a check-down artist. Going back to Christian Ponder, by the end of year 3, he wasn't showing much potential. His play was average at best, and he was already regressing. Minnesota felt like they weren't making the progress they needed with the current staff in place and brought in a whole new regime. What happens when you bring in new coaches? They want a different quarterback. So, out with Ponder, and in stepped Teddy Bridgewater. Ponder would not be re-signed after sitting the bench in 2014. Crazy enough, he would never play another snap. He failed to make the Raiders roster in 2015, then bounced around as a backup when teams needed an emergency quarterback on the roster. After being released by the 49ers in 2016, Ponder's NFL career was over. When you're a guy who's in the league solely for your smarts and decision making, that better come through pretty quickly, and it just didn't work for Ponder. The reality was, he was not even close to a first-round talent. But with the high demands of getting your franchise quarterback, alongside the pressure of other teams snagging the top prospects in the draft, that led the Vikings to making this poor decision. Since 2011, that first-round class of quarterbacks has served as a warning to many franchises who wanted to draft a quarterback in the first round. Now here's what's crazy. There were multiple quarterbacks after the first round that were better than those three. Andy Dalton turned into a franchise piece for Cincinnati, and he leads all quarterbacks from this class in career passing yards. Colin Kaepernick had his unbelievable run to the Super Bowl when he was thrust into the starting role following Alex Smith's injury in 2012. Then a standout 2013 season had people thinking he would be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, although things fell off quickly following 2013. And funny enough, the 2016 Niners featured Kaepernick, Gabbert, and Ponder all on the same roster. But finally, to top this class off, maybe the most underrated 6th round quarterback of all time, Tyrod Taylor. Normally, 6th round quarterbacks are, at best, a backup, quite possibly a practice squad guy. We all know that Tom Brady was the 6th round pick, but since him, there really haven't been many quarterbacks that were even decent. That is, other than Tyrod. So he sat on the bench for 4 years in Baltimore. He didn't start a single game. The Ravens decided to not re-sign him, and he went to Buffalo. So what did he do? He became a Pro Bowler in his first year. Then 2 seasons later, despite the team trying out Nathan Peterman, Tyrod Taylor ultimately led the Bills to the playoffs for the first time in 18 years. He went from making about $1 million a year to a $92 million extension. Of course, this all went downhill, mostly because teams used him as a placeholder for their draftees. First, the Bills traded him, right after he led them to the playoffs. Then, the Browns drafted Baker, and finally the Chargers took Justin Herbert. Who knows what'll happen with Tyrod in Houston, but his run in the NFL so far has been incredibly impressive. As a Browns fan, I couldn't be more thankful for him. He was a professional and a grown-up that team needed. And even though Baker took over the starting job, Tyrod still had their best play that season.
Taylor for the end